Power corrupts, but absolute power creates monsters. When dictators hold the lives of millions in their hands, some choose to use that terrifying authority for the most bizarre, twisted, and unthinkable purposes imaginable. Today we're exposing the most absurd and disturbing ways dictators have abused their power, including Kim Jong-un's horrifying pleasure squad. Of 2,000 women, a golden dog statue worth millions while people starved, and a coronation ceremony so outrageous that even Hollywood couldn't have imagined it. This is not just about political corruption. This is about human beings who became so drunk on power that they lost all connection to reality and basic human decency. We'll journey through the most shocking examples of dictatorial excess, revealing how men drunk on power seem torn from the pages of dystopian fiction. Our first story, Pol Pot, who ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979, harbored a deep personal hatred for mathematics. As a child, he had struggled with math, and as dictator, he decided to wage war against the subject itself. In one of history's most bizarre educational policies, Pol Pot declared that every mathematics teacher in Cambodia would be fired immediately. The teaching of mathematics was banned throughout the entire country. Math textbooks were collected in massive piles and burned in public ceremonies, as if they were dangerous contraband. Pol Pot justified this madness by claiming that advanced mathematics was a symbol of decadent Western civilization and represented intellectual class enemies. His stated goal was to return Cambodia to its agricultural roots by eliminating complex science and mathematics. He publicly promoted this as a way to strengthen farming, though his true motivation was far more sinister. Years later, confidants of the dictator revealed the real reason behind this insane policy. Pol Pot couldn't tolerate anyone appearing more intelligent than him. By destroying mathematical education, he was systematically eliminating potential intellectual threats to his authority. From educational destruction, we move to an equally absurd example of paranoid military spending that transformed an entire country into a concrete wasteland. Enver Hoxha, Albania's dictator during the 1970s and 1980s, became convinced that his country was about to be invaded by enemies. His solution was both simple and completely insane. He would cover the entire nation with bunkers. The scale of this project defies belief. Nearly 1 million bunkers were constructed across Albania, making it officially the most bunker-dense country in the world. Mathematically, this meant there was roughly 1 bunker for every 4 residents of the small nation. Instead of investing money in food, education, or healthcare for his impoverished population, Hoxha poured enormous resources into this concrete obsession. But here's where it gets truly absurd. These bunkers weren't even designed to protect people. They were meant solely for military defense. The problem was that Albania barely had any soldiers to actually occupy these bunkers. Even more ridiculous, the bunkers themselves were often so tiny and poorly constructed that any farmer with an axe could have destroyed them within minutes. So Albania ended up with nearly 1 million useless concrete domes scattered across its landscape, a permanent monument to one man's paranoid delusions, while the population struggled with poverty and hunger. Our next dictator saw himself less as a political leader and more as a Hollywood celebrity, with equally outrageous results. Muammar Gaddafi, who ruled Libya until 2011, demanded that everything in his life be extravagant and spectacular. While other world leaders employed traditional bodyguards in dark suits, Gaddafi chose something dramatically different, an Amazon Guard. This was an elite unit of hand-picked, armed women who appeared in fashionable uniforms. They weren't just selected for their combat abilities. All members had to be exceptionally tall and strong, and most bizarre of all, they were required to remain virgins forever as proof of their loyalty and discipline. Gaddafi traveled everywhere with this entourage of Amazon warriors. Combined with his own colorful outfits and ever-present sunglasses, the entire spectacle looked like something from a movie set rather than actual governance. But Gaddafi's celebrity obsession extended far beyond his personal security. He regularly threw massive parties, flying in American stars like Mariah Carey, Beyoncé, and 50 Cent, paying them millions just for their presence at his events. The numbers are staggering. Nelly Furtado received $1 million from the dictator for performing a single 40-minute private concert. While ordinary Libyans struggled with poverty and oppression, Their leader was essentially buying friendships with international celebrities using the nation's oil wealth. This wasn't just extravagance, it was a systematic theft of resources that belonged to the Libyan people, all to feed one man's grandiose delusions of celebrity status. From Libya's celebrity obsessions, we travel to one of the world's most isolated nations, where dictatorial absurdity reached truly spectacular heights. Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, who ruled Turkmenistan until 2022, demonstrated his power through increasingly bizarre monuments and displays. While his impoverished nation struggled with hunger and unemployment, this dictator focused his attention on creating oversized tributes to his personal obsessions. The most absurd example of his reign was a gigantic golden statue of his beloved pet dog, erected in the center of the capital city. This wasn't a small memorial or modest tribute. The statue stood 6 meters tall, crafted entirely from gold, dominating the city skyline while ordinary citizens couldn't afford basic necessities. But Berdimuhamedov's dog obsession didn't stop with the monument. The self-proclaimed wise leader of all Turkmen actually wrote an entire book dedicated to his favorite animal, filled with poems praising the dog's various qualities and virtues. This golden canine monument perfectly symbolized the disconnect between dictatorial priorities and human suffering. While families struggled to feed their children, their leader spent millions on a golden tribute to his pet. The most disturbing aspect wasn't just the waste of money, but what it represented. A leader so removed from reality that he genuinely believed a golden dog statue was a worthy use of national resources. But even Berdimuhamedov's golden dog pales in comparison to the megalomaniacal projects of his predecessor, Saparmurat Niyazov, who ruled Turkmenistan until 1990. If you've seen the comedy film The Dictator with Sacha Baron Cohen, you might recognize some of what comes next. In the movie, the fictional dictator renames everything after himself, asking, "Do you want the Aladin news or the Aladin news?" While this seemed like absurd comedy, Niyazov actually implemented similar policies in real life. The dictator officially renamed months and days after himself and his family members. April, which was previously called April in the Turkmen language, became Gurban Sultan because that was his mother's name. Even more bizarrely, the Turkmen word for bread was changed to Gurban Sultan to honor his mother. But Niyazov's ego projects extended far beyond mere renaming. Like a Disney villain brought to life, he erected a 12-meter-tall golden statue of himself that automatically rotated to always face the sun throughout the day. He also authored a book called the Ronama, a bizarre mixture of autobiography, spiritual guide, and history textbook. This book became mandatory reading in schools and universities. Citizens had to answer questions about it to get their driver's licenses. The book wasn't just recommended reading, it was legally required knowledge for basic civic participation. Niyazov's delusions grew so extreme that he declared reading the Ronama 3 times would guarantee entry into heaven. In perhaps the ultimate display of cosmic arrogance, he actually launched a copy of his book into space, claiming it would conquer space itself. Now we reach perhaps the most disturbing example of dictatorial abuse, Kim Jong-un's systematic exploitation of young women for personal entertainment. While the North Korean people live in crushing poverty with virtually no freedoms, their leader operates what's called a pleasure squad consisting of 2,000 young women whose sole purpose is to provide entertainment and intimate services to Kim Jong-un and his high-ranking generals. The selection process alone reveals the horror of this system. Male generals visit schools and universities, observing students to identify the most attractive girls. If a girl is deemed suitable and is confirmed to be a virgin, she's selected for the squad whether she wants to participate or not. These women, some of whom are still minors when selected, cannot refuse. They're forced to serve the dictator through entertainment, dancing, and more intimate activities that please the supreme leader. Before beginning their duties, they undergo strict training that includes learning massage techniques and other skills designed to satisfy their powerful clients. The compensation for this forced service isn't money or genuine benefits. Squad members receive only basic household supplies in exchange for what amounts to systematic sexual slavery sanctioned by the state. This isn't just political oppression, it's institutionalized human trafficking operating at the highest levels of government. While international organizations condemn human trafficking worldwide, One of the world's most powerful dictators operates his own personal trafficking network with complete impunity. The most disturbing aspect is how normalized this system has become within North Korea's power structure. What should be recognized as a horrific crime against humanity is simply considered another privilege of absolute power. In dictatorships, this psychological corruption accelerates because there are no checks on behavior. When nobody can say no to you, when your every whim becomes law, when human beings become objects for your entertainment, the brain literally rewires itself around these new realities. Kim Jong-un's Pleasure Army. It's about total domination over other human beings. This shows minds that have lost all connection to normal human empathy. The isolation of dictatorship makes this worse. Surrounded only by people who fear them, dictators lose touch with reality itself. The financial cost of dictatorial ego projects reveals another layer of their devastating impact. These aren't just strange personal quirks. They represent massive theft from entire populations. Turkmenistan's golden monuments and marble palaces cost hundreds of millions of dollars, while the average citizen earned just $60 per month. Gaddafi's celebrity parties and Amazon Guard consumed Libya's oil wealth that could have funded schools, hospitals, and infrastructure for generations. The most tragic irony is that many of these nations possess enormous natural wealth. Libya has vast oil reserves, Turkmenistan has some of the world's largest natural gas deposits, and North Korea has significant mineral resources. Instead of using these assets to improve citizens' lives, dictators funnel the money into personal obsessions. Cambodia under Pol Pot faced different circumstances, as it was primarily agricultural, but even there, the destruction of educational infrastructure cost the nation decades of potential development. Entire generations grew up without basic mathematical literacy, crippling the country's ability to participate in the modern economy. The economic damage extends far beyond immediate costs. When dictators prioritize golden dog statues over education, the lost human potential compounds over decades. Children who could have become engineers, doctors, or scientists instead grow up in poverty and ignorance. Perhaps most disturbing is how these dictators maintain support systems that enable their worst impulses. They don't operate alone, they require armies of collaborators, enforcers, and enablers. In North Korea, generals participate in selecting women. In Turkmenistan, architects and construction workers built golden monuments while knowing people were starving. In Cambodia, teachers and administrators helped implement the destruction of mathematical education. The propaganda machines of dictatorships excel at creating alternative realities where the most bizarre actions seem reasonable. Citizens are told that mathematical education threatens national purity, that golden monuments demonstrate national strength, that pleasure squads represent cultural tradition. Over time, even absurd justifications can become accepted truth within closed societies. When information is controlled and dissent is punished, entire populations can be convinced to support policies that any outside observer would recognize as insane. Today's dictators have access to surveillance and control technologies that previous tyrants could only dream of. This amplifies their ability to implement bizarre policies and crush resistance. North Korea uses sophisticated monitoring systems to ensure compliance with its strict social controls. Citizens' communications are monitored, their movements tracked, and their loyalty constantly tested. This technological capability makes resistance to policies like the Pleasure Squad nearly impossible. In Turkmenistan, the government controls internet access, television broadcasting, and even international travel. Citizens cannot easily learn about life in other countries or organize opposition to their leaders' strange priorities. These technological tools don't just enforce compliance, they enable dictators to implement increasingly elaborate control systems. When you can monitor every citizen's behavior, track their communications, and control their access to information, even the most bizarre policies become enforceable. The result is populations that become trapped in alternative realities shaped entirely by their dictators' delusions. Normal standards of reason and morality become irrelevant when resistance is impossible and information is controlled. The economic structures surrounding dictatorial regimes create powerful incentives for corruption and abuse that extend far beyond the dictators themselves. In resource-rich countries like Libya and Turkmenistan, enormous wealth flows through systems controlled by small groups of people with no accountability. This creates opportunities for spectacular theft and waste that would be impossible in transparent systems. But the economic incentives affect everyone around the dictator, not just the leader. Architects who design golden monuments, security forces who enable pleasure squads, and administrators who implement bizarre policies all receive financial benefits for their participation. Over time, entire economic systems become dependent on dictatorial abuse. In North Korea, the military and security apparatus that enables the pleasure squad system also controls significant portions of the economy. Challenging the abuse would threaten their economic interests. This creates self-perpetuating cycles where abuse becomes economically necessary for those in power. Even people who might personally disapprove of pleasure squads or golden dog statues have strong financial incentives to enable and protect these systems. These individual examples reveal universal patterns about how absolute power corrupts human judgment and moral reasoning. Across different cultures, time periods, and political systems, unlimited authority consistently produces similar results. The pattern always begins with small abuses that test boundaries and establish precedents. A leader might start with minor personal indulgences or small violations of normal standards. When these face no meaningful resistance, they escalate into more extreme behaviors. Gradually, the leader's circle of enablers expands to include more people with various motivations for participation. Some act from fear, others from greed, and still others from genuine belief in the leader's vision. As the system becomes more entrenched, it develops its own momentum and internal logic. Practices that initially seemed shocking become routine procedures. Institutions adapt to serve the leader's personal interests rather than public welfare. The stories we've explored today aren't just historical curiosities or foreign aberrations. They represent universal human tendencies that can emerge anywhere when proper safeguards fail and accountability disappears. Every functioning democracy contains people who would abuse unlimited power in similarly extreme ways if given the opportunity. The difference lies not in the character of leaders, but in the systems that constrain their behavior. Constitutional limits, independent institutions, free media, and engaged citizens create barriers that prevent the kind of absolute authority that enables pleasure squads, golden monuments, and wars on education. When these safeguards weaken or disappear, the potential for similar abuses emerges everywhere. The most important lesson from these horrific examples is the absolute necessity of maintaining systems that prevent any individual from gaining unlimited power over others. History shows us repeatedly that such power inevitably corrupts, often in ways that surpass our worst imagination. Understanding these patterns helps us recognize warning signs in our own societies and around the world. When leaders begin attacking education, targeting vulnerable populations, or using public resources for personal gratification, we're seeing the early stages of processes that can lead to much worse abuses. The courage to resist these tendencies early, before they become entrenched, represents our best defense against the kind of systematic horror we've examined today. Every society must remain vigilant against the human tendency to normalize gradually increasing abuses of power. What other examples of dictatorial excess have you encountered? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more investigations into the dark corners of human power and corruption. Next week, we'll be exploring how some of history's most brutal dictators met their ends and what their final moments revealed about the true nature of absolute power. The stories you've heard today serve as eternal warnings about what happens when human beings are given unlimited authority over others. May we never forget these lessons, and may we never allow such horrors to emerge again. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.